We are 10 games into the NBA season, and I believe there are 4 teams that can legitimately compete for the NBA title. But don't worry, we're going to be talking about each and every team in today's video and how they've started this young season. But without further ado, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them down below. I love to interact with you guys. Of course, on the road to 4,000 subs, help us get there. But without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off here with the Philadelphia 76ers, the number 1 team record-wise in the NBA. I believe they are contenders, as this might finally be the year the 76ers can make that deep playoff run. As Joel Embiid said, there is no ego on this team, of course pointing at former teammate there in James Harden. And as James Harden continues to struggle with his new team in the Clippers, this Sixers team is flourishing without him. As to be honest, there's just a different aura and a different feel around this team this year. They started 0-1, but they've won 8 straight. Again, they have 2 players on this team that are top 3 in the NBA's most recent MVP voting, as of course Joel Embiid, as he's the reigning MVP from last year, but then also Tyrese Maxey, as he is having a career start to the year, and he also just had 50 points in a game, his career high. Again, there's just a different aura and a different feel around this team this year. Will my opinion change come playoff time, just due to how the process has played in recent years? Maybe, but as of right now, they look like the best Sixers team since Jimmy Butler was there, and I think they are title contenders. Also, prayers out to Kelly Oubre. Get well soon, as he was also playing amazing to start the season. But moving over to the West Coast, and the reigning defending NBA champions, the Denver Nuggets, they're still number 1 in the West, and no doubt, they are contenders for me, as despite losing Jamal Murray to a hamstring early this season, this team is still on top of the Western Conference. They have remained one of the league's best home teams, as they've started 6-0 at home, as they've also picked up quality wins at home against teams like the Mavericks, the Warriors, and of course some other teams along the way. But if I had to nitpick, if I had to pick out a cause for concern for this team, they're 500 on the road. Maybe they've lost 2 straight road games. Those losses have come without Jamal Murray, of course, but I guess the question is, will the loss of Jamal Murray ultimately be too much for this team to overcome until he returns? Again, as great as Jamal Murray is, this team still has the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic, and as long as he's on the court elevating his teammates, playing the way that he can with that great supporting cast, this team will be more than fine. I think they're title contenders with or without Jamal Murray, but of course Jamal Murray adds that different element and really takes them over the top, as we saw when he's healthy. That team is that much more dangerous and can be that much more dominant when it comes to playoff time. But back to the Eastern Conference, we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics. Another team that has been off to a good start and undefeated at home is the Boston Celtics. The pickups of Drew Holiday and Kristaps have been exactly what they thought they would be. They complete this team, and in moments, they can take pressure off the stars, like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. You could even say that Drew is not playing his best basketball, so that even adds to this team and the potential of this team going forward. This team leads the NBA in point differential, and they also have the best conference record in the entire association. It's scary to think that this team isn't even clicking on all cylinders, and they've still been dominant. As of right now, they are my Eastern Conference favorites, and the Boston Celtics are, of course, title contenders. This one might cause some controversy, but even though they're the 5th seed right now, and they've been off to a rocky start, give me the Milwaukee Bucks still as contenders here in the NBA. As again, this team's gotten off to a slow start, which I think was expected, as I predicted that. As to me, you're trading for a superstar in Dame. Anytime you have 2 superstars, no matter the play style, they need time to mesh and to play at their fullest potential. Not to mention, they also have a new coach. So they have a new coach, a new star player. There's a lot of meshing that needs to go on, and the first 10 to 15 games or so is the perfect time to do that. But this team, they barely got a graphic in today's video. They've ultimately struggled this season. I mean, they're 1-4 on the road. They have a negative point differential and a bottom 10 defense here in the NBA, which is unheard of in the Giannis era. But none of that is a recipe for success. But again, what separates them from the crowd, what gives them the edge even as a 5 seed, is Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, 2 top 15 players in the NBA. You could even argue Giannis is the best player in the NBA. I know what we've seen so far hasn't necessarily spelled out contender, but they have Giannis and Dame, and if they can figure that out, as well as getting some more help from their supporting cast, this team is going to be scary. And say what you want, but if the playoffs started today, nobody's going to be lining up to play them, necessarily. So the Bucks, they get a hall pass for now. They'll figure it out. Now, for the remaining teams, I don't believe any team other than the top four that I named can be classified as contenders in my book. Again, yet. But are some of them really good? Are some of them going to make some noise in the playoffs? Yes. But there's a difference to me between a good playoff team and a title contender. So for the rest of these teams, I want to go through and I want to ask myself, do I believe they can play or will play at the caliber that they are for the remainder of the season? For example, we'll start here with the Dallas Mavericks, as I think the Dallas Mavericks are a really good team, but I don't believe they can finish as a top 2 seed in the Western Conference, which is where they currently stand. So some of these teams are going to have less room or more room than others, but I think that just adds to the fun, makes it more interesting going forward, but hopefully that concept makes sense. But again, for the Dallas Mavericks, as much as I want to believe that two of my favorite players of all time can go out there and win a title, I have to be realistic and I have to be logical. I don't believe that this core currently can win the NBA Finals. However, their two stars are still putting on a show, as we all expected, as through 10 games this season, Luka Doncic has recorded 326 points, 85 assists, and 84 rebounds. The only other player in NBA history who has ever exceeded those numbers to start a season was Luka Doncic last season. Truly remarkable top 3 player in this game, no doubt about it. But Kyrie Irving, his counterpart, his Robin, has been awesome too. I mean, this is a guy that's still averaging 23, 24 points a game, 7 assists, a steal and a half. I really think this duo has figured it out. I would love to see this team be active at the deadline, however. I still think they need that actual true big man to take this team over the top. Maybe a Clint Capella is that guy to do it. Again, when we take a step back, the Mavericks have had a relatively easy start to the year schedule-wise. Their stars have been amazing. But again, they're also taking care of business. I just think they're missing that next piece. I think they're missing that true big man, like I mentioned, to take them over the top. So don't get me wrong. I think they have what it takes to finish as the top 4 seed in the Western Conference. But there's a big difference to me, again, between a good playoff team and a title contender. But let's move over to the Minnesota Timberwolves, as they might have the league's most impressive resume so far this season. As hear me out here, as they have the 4th best record, the 3rd best point differential, they have the number 1 defense, and not to mention, most of their wins, I'll say this, they're 4-1 against teams that are over 500 right now. So the Timberwolves have had, no doubt, the league's most impressive start to the NBA season. And 2 of those 4 wins, as I just mentioned, they're 4-1 against the top 14 teams in the league. 2 of those wins have come against the Nuggets and have come against the Celtics, 2 teams that I had as title favorites, and the league consensus, all the media, have them as title contenders. So, look, this Timberwolves team has been surprising, to say the least. But Anthony Edwards, he's been amazing, and he's been the guy for this team. And he might actually be living up to those Michael Jordan comparisons, as this is a guy that, has been having a career start to the year. And there's just a different feeling when you watch Anthony Edwards. He's not going to be, in your face all the time, but he's just going to go out there and he's going to be better than you, is a good way to put it. He kind of has the same mannerisms as a Michael Jordan. But this team just falls into the same trap of the Dallas Mavericks, as they're good, but I just don't think they're a title contender, and that's why they have them here. I'm going to be buying into the stock, though. I do think, as crazy as it might sound, I do think the Timberwolves, given their current roster construction and how Anthony Edwards has been playing on a different level, I do think that they can finish as a top 3 seed in the Western Conference. Again, they still have guys on their team like Jaden McDaniels, who never gets the love he deserves, as I think he got a big payday this offseason, so shout out to him. But he should be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversations, no doubt about it. So they have the star power, they have the defense, and this team, just to me, this looks like the best overall Wolves team since the Jimmy Butler era. This is the second time I said that in this video, by the way. But Anthony Edwards, he's been on a different level. I'm buying into the stock. I think they can finish as the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. I told everyone this offseason that the Pacers were going to be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, and I was called crazy. But here we are, 10 games in, as this is the modern-day version of the 7-second or less Phoenix Suns offense, as it's an offense that really helped me fall in love with the game of basketball, and I think there's a lot of similarities with the modern-day version that the Pacers are running, as they play fast, and they get a lot of shots up and very quickly. It all starts with their all-NBA level point guard in Tyrese Halliburton, as he's averaging 24, 12.5 on 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. He does look like a all-NBA level point guard at this point of the season. But this Pacers team, they lead the league in points per game and assists per game, which is expected at their pace. But they're also second in field goal percentage, three-pointers made, and three-point percentage. I do worry about this team when it comes to playoff time because we know teams that play at this pace and play at this style, if they go cold, well, they can find themselves in some deep trouble and ultimately find themselves on the couch at home and not in the playoff race. However, for the regular season, this team screams like a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. So to me, I'm buying the fact that this team can finish as a top 3 team because they have what it takes. They have the veteran coaching. If they need to slow the game down, they can. But I just think this roster is really complete, and they're not done. I think they can also move guys like Buddy Hield at the deadline to, of course, pick up some other valuable pieces for the long haul. But again, for the regular season, I'm buying into the fact that this team could finish as a top 3 seed. I love the Pacers, and I told you guys before the season they were going to be legit. But in the Western Conference, a top 4 seed right now is the very young and very inexperienced Houston Rockets, as the longest winning streaks of the young season belong to the Sixers, who went on an 8-game streak. They're currently on an 8-game streak. The Minnesota Timberwolves, who have won 6 straight games, and the Houston Rockets, as they have won 6 straight games, and that streak includes wins over the Los Angeles Lakers, who they beat by 34 points. But they also have a big time win against the Nuggets this past Sunday, which I guess you could say is an upset, even though the Nuggets don't have Jamal Murray. This team was heavily questioned this offseason for a variety of different things. For one, the future of the organization, the Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks signings this offseason. Of course, they got a big chunk of money, but also the Ime Udoka hiring, as he, of course, had his questions after his departure from the Celtics. But this team, at least for now, has silenced all of the critics, and shout out to everyone involved. Of course, all the people I just mentioned, but special shout out to me for the player Alperen Sengun, as he's really a mini Jokic for them, if that makes any sense. As Ime quickly realized, when he came into this team, he realized who the best player on this team actually was. It's not Jalen Green. As much as Jalen Green is the second best player, he's not the best. And that belongs to Sengun, as when this offense has switched around Sengun, and it is in his hands all the time, this team has flourished. Again, he plays like a mini Nikola Jokic. So I love the potential of this team. I think they're way too young to compete. I think their inexperience can get in the way. I'm just hoping this team is not this year's version of the Utah Jazz. I think they, maybe can make the playoffs. But, however, we had teams like the Blazers and the Jazz start off hot last year, and they fizzled out into the playoffs, or they missed the playoffs. To me, I don't think there's any chance this Houston Rockets team finishes as a top 4 seed in the Western Conference. But in the Eastern Conference, let's talk about the Miami Heat. They're currently the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, and I don't believe they can finish as a 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, so I'm going to be selling their stock as of right now. Even though this team started 0-4 and they won 5 straight games to that point, I just don't believe that they will finish as a top 4 seed, simply put. But let's talk about that change. As they started 0-4, they've won 5 straight. In that stretch, the biggest change has, again, been their offense. As when their offense is clicking, this team wins games at a high rate. I know, it's a big shocker, right? But on top of the fact that they have a top 10 defense, they're surprisingly playing at a top 10 pace in basketball right now, which is very unlike the Miami Heat, especially in the Jimmy Butler era. But a big reason for that pace is Tyler Hero, who this offseason was in trade rumor after trade rumor, and he took those rumors personally, as this year he's averaging 24, 5, and 5 on great splits. So shout out to Tyler Hero for, I guess, silencing the doubters as of right now. But the best way to explain this team is simply that they're playing like the Miami Heat. They're top 4 in the conference. They're finding ways to win, even though it's not always pretty. Again, they have a negative point differential, but they're top 4 in the Eastern Conference. There's just nothing like the Heat culture. But I just can't buy into the hype that they're going to finish as a top 4 seed as far as the regular season. Let's talk about the young, the upcoming, the fun Oklahoma City Thunder. Right now, they are the 5th seed in the West. And they've had an interesting start to the season, as they're 5-0 against Eastern Conference opponents, yet 1-4 in their own conference. and that lone win that they had in the Western Conference came against an injured Suns team just a few days ago. So up until this past Sunday, they were winless in the Western Conference. But aside from their record, they still have a top 7 offense. They're playing at a top 5 pace in the NBA, which is promising that you're playing that fast and you're playing that well it could be scary for the rest of the league. But on top of that, they also have, a top 15 or so defense, so a defense that has a lot of potential to be better. But right now, I think they're at their floor, which is around middle of the pack. But Shea is their leader, and he's repeating his dominance, his all-NBA level of play from last season. But he's now getting more help than ever, which is what I think makes his team scarier than ever. As guys like Chet, J-Dub, Lou Dort, Josh Giddey, they've all improved, though not always statistically. When you watch them, all of these guys have improved, at least so far this season. This team's just really weird for me. As of right now, I think they'll probably finish in that 6-7 range. Maybe avoiding the play-in, but maybe just being the best team in the play-in and getting that 7 seed. I don't think they will finish as the top 5 seed. But again, right now I have them at number 6. I'm really not going to be mad about one spot. So again, it's a matter of one spot. So I'm going to be technically selling. But again, if you have them as a 5 seed instead of the 6 seed like I have them, of course I'm not going to break my neck to argue with that fact. But let's also talk about the De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis-led Light the Beam Sacramento Kings. As this team, before last night's games, were the 9 seed in the Western Conference. They jump all the way up to the 6 seed, as this was the fan favorite team from last year, and they've started off kind of rocky this year, but they continue to fight, and I think it all starts with Mike Brown's excellence, as he has continued to make the much needed adjustments, even though some of the fans might not always agree. But most notably, we know this offseason, he was going on podcast, the coach of the Sacramento Kings, and he was saying Keegan Murray needs to shoot the ball, and he held Keegan Murray to that standard, as of course we know the saga early in this season, as if Keegan Murray is not shooting the ball, at least not to the aggressiveness of Mike Brown, he's getting pulled from the game. So Mike Brown is that tough, hard-nosed coach that this young team needs. But even when their star, De'Aaron Fox, went down, Mike Brown has adjusted each and every game to keep them afloat. As after losing the first 3 games without De'Aaron Fox, well, of course when he went down with injury, the Kings would go on to change their starting lineup a couple of times. But the biggest change was when they moved Davion Mitchell to the bench and they moved Keon Ellis to the starting lineup. When they made that change, they won 2 straight. The culture of this team is impeccable. They're up there with the Heat culture. But then De'Aaron Fox returned last night, and of course he returned, and they got a win, as this team didn't overall lose a step. They beat the Cavs, who are still a really good team, and the head coach of this team, Mike Brown, got his 400th career win, of course, against his former team. There's no doubt to me that this team can finish as a top 6 seed, and that's the fact that I'm buying into this. Do I have them finishing as number 6 or number 5? Either or, again, give or take a spot or two, but I do think they can finish as a top 6 seed and avoid the Western Conference play-in. But moving over to the Atlanta Hawks, the current 6 seed in the Eastern Conference, they have just been about average this season, as again, they're middle of the pack record-wise, offense and defense, they've been just about league average, as well as the records at home and on the road. They've just been average this season. But they did go on a 4-game winning streak earlier this season, so that is worth a note. And that did include quality wins over teams like Milwaukee, like Minnesota, one of Minnesota's lone 2 losses this year, and of course the New Orleans Pelicans. So that is promising. Another promising thing is that this backcourt looks better than ever. DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, aside from the sporadic moments that Trae Young has where he shoots 3 3-pointers in a row from half court, this backcourt has looked more dangerous than ever, right? As DeJounte, you can argue this is the best basketball he's played in his entire career. Again, not always statistically, but off the eye test, DeJounte has looked really good to start this season. I think Quinn Snyder is the right coach for these guys, and they made that change late last season. Quinn Snyder has these guys bought into the system, and again, I think this team will be busy when it comes to the trade deadline mark. Most notably trading guys like a Clint Capella or Double O to get that next big star, or I guess that next big piece next to their backcourt. But as of right now, they're promising, and again, they're just about average. I don't think they will finish as a top 6 seed due to the inconsistencies in this offense and this team. But I do think they make the playoffs. I think they're probably a team that goes into the play-in as a heavy favorite, and they win their first game, and they're the 7th seed in the East, right? But I don't think they will finish as a top 6 seed. I think they will no doubt be in the play-in tournament. But how about a more dominant, a team that is more decorated? That's the word I'm looking for. A team that's way more decorated. There's a lot more history with this core. Of course, we're talking about the Golden State Warriors, the current 7th seed in the Western Conference. I think they dropped a spot from 6 to 7 over the night, and of course over the span of last night's games. But 6-5 is definitely not an ideal start for this veteran team. But the team has, I guess, flipped the narrative, I guess is one thing we can point out. As last season, they were one of the worst road teams of all time to make the playoffs. But winning, they were also winning the majority of their home games. This season, as you would guess, that's different, as this team is, I think, 5-1 on the road this season. So they've been taking care of business on the road, and I think you're going to be more confident in the fact that you can turn around and win more games at home than on the road. So this Warriors team, I think, will be more than fine. Of course, they've been adjusting to that CP3 addition, as he's had career worst across the board statistically to start the year. But I do believe it will be a good addition in the long run, as of course come playoff time, CP3 can be a better player and better version of himself, of course, if he can stay healthy. This team still has a top 10 offense. They still have a borderline top 10 defense. I think they were number 11 in the league. Look, it's the Warriors. They have Steph Curry, who's maybe the best version of himself we've ever seen, as well as Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, as well as Steve Kerr. This team's going to be more than fine. They're a decorated team. They've been there. They've done that. Of course, they could switch. They could turn that switch at any point. But how about a way younger team of the Orlando Magic? Because they're 5-4 this year. They're 7th in the Eastern Conference. And look, this young Magic team has been exactly that this season. They've been young and they've been inexperienced, as they have a top 5 defense, which many didn't expect. But even with that, they have failed to get hot early on, and they have failed to win more than 2 games in a row, given the defensive excellence at any point in the season. To me, look, Palos, he still looks the best he ever has. He's having a career year statistically, even though it's only his second year, right? But he's actually shooting threes this year, which is it's very promising to see a guy that was 1 of 30 throughout February from 3 last year, and now he's shooting threes with I guess confidence is a good way to put it. He really does look like a young Carmelo Anthony, which of course is my favorite player of all time. But Franz Wagner, his counterpart, is playing at a level, he's playing at the same level statistically of last year, but he just looks like a better player, if that makes any sense. This team is fun. They have young stars, and again, they're buying into the defensive side of the ball. I think if they can continue to be a top 5 defense, they will make the playoffs. However, I don't know if they can keep that rate up. I think they're going to be a play-in hopeful. I think they might finish as the 9 seed or the 10 seed when it's all said and done. But still, a very promising year for Paolo and Franz that are going to be coming, no doubt about it. But also shout out to Markelle Fultz and Wendell Carter. They've been big reasons why they've had a top 5 defense. For the Los Angeles Lakers, I'm going to be buying into the fact that they can finish as a top 8 seed in the Eastern Conference, as they are at 5-5, and not one part of the season has been pretty, as all 5 of their wins are within 5 points, and all of them have come within the last few minutes of the game. So none of their wins have been promising, and they're also bottom 10 on both sides of the floor, offensively and defensively. It's a complete 180 from the second half of last season, as they made the Western Conference Finals, due to the fact that all their guys were buying in on the defensive side of the ball, and they were top 10 in offense and defense. But this year, again, it's been a complete 180. But at the end of the day, they have the depth, they have the star power, and they're going to be busy around the trade deadline, per usual. Of course, there'll probably be a prime buyout spot for some of those disgruntled veterans. This team, to me, I think no doubt they will finish as a top 8 seed in the Western Conference, but it's not been pretty. And to me, they might need to they might have to have another busy offseason. And if they don't win it all this year, they might have to explore trading Anthony Davis if they don't want to fear losing LeBron James in his last couple of years until he retires. But then the final team we have a graphic for and we want to really dive into is the New York Knicks, as they're an even 5-5, 8 seed. They haven't had a great start to the year. However, they have won 3 of their last 4 with notable wins over Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs, where he was shut down, and of course the star-studded Clippers. this team has no doubt had some up and downs to start the year, especially with their star players in Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. Of course, we know the viral clip of, Julius Randle he was shooting, I think, 2 of 13 in the game, absolutely atrocious from the field. But late in the game, Jalen Brunson, who had 45 points at the time, took a double team shot instead of passing it to the wide open Julius Randle. And of course, Jalen Brunson missed the shot, and Julius Randle did not get back on defense. And that costed them another bucket late in that game, which is ultimately why they lost the game. So again, their stars need to get on the right page. But just like the Hawks, this is a team that has been middle of the road, whether if it's, record-wise, whether if it's in their conference, at home, or on the road. They've just been about middle of the pack and about as middle of the road as you can be. It definitely helps when you have a top 2 defense in the entire NBA. I'm just hoping that this team goes out there and they try to make a big move, as far as trading Julius Randle, because I think this team is at its best when Jalen Brunson is the guy. But Julius Randle to me is just not a championship level player. But will the Knicks, I think the Knicks will just be the Knicks. They'll do what they always have done, as they're going to flirt with different trade packages, flirt with trading player X and player B, but they just never pull the trigger. That is the Knicks formula on a year-to-year basis. Of course, it's in the script. Regardless, I think they will no doubt finish as a top 8 seed. They have a top 3 defense, and they most likely will for the remainder of the season. The Knicks will be the Knicks, and of course, Tom Thibodeau will get this team straight when it matters most. But let's talk about the teams that didn't have a graphic in today's video. The teams that are from 9 to 15 in the Western Conference standings. We have teams like the Suns, the Pelicans, the Clippers, who I wanted to talk about on today's video. The Blazers, the Spurs, the Jazz, and the Memphis Grizzlies. The Suns, they've had their fair share of injuries with Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. We haven't really seen all of those guys fully healthy at the same time this season, and they're still 4-6. So when they figure that out, when they get a healthy, this team, of course, has the talent to beat anybody. The Pelicans, right now they started the year 4-1, but they've lost 5 straight games. Of course, there's starting to be some animosity there with that franchise and their star players. Is Zion going to be starting to get disgruntled? Does he want out of New Orleans? There's going to be a lot of questions this year for the Pelicans, but that's kind of the reason why I had them missing the playoffs in my preseason rankings. The Clippers, even though they have Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and James Harden, 4 first-ballot Hall of Famers, this team is 3-6. They've lost 5 straight games, and they haven't won a single game with the addition of James Harden. I think there's starting to be a common trend where it's not the teams that James Harden is on. He has to start looking in the mirror, because not all these teams are poorly constructed. It is you, James Harden. And, of course, the Clippers fell for that bait, and they are struggling because of it. But I do think, however, unlike other teams, they still have Kawhi Leonard. They still have Paul George. I think they, if need be, James Harden can run with the second unit. And, of course, we can have the dominance of those 2 star players in Paul George and Kawhi take over and, of course, lead them back to a promising playoff spot. The Blazers, the Spurs, of course, Wemby's been off to a great start this year. The Jazz, their magic has kind of died out. And the Grizzlies, they're just waiting for Ja Morant to return. But, I think Taylor Jenkins, I think this is the absolute rock bottom for them. I think they will figure it out. And I think they're going to start to get hot here in a couple weeks. But who knows? They've really missed Ja Morant. Rightfully so. I mean, that's a top 5 point guard in the entire NBA. In the Eastern Conference, we have the Nets, the Raptors, the Cavs, who I'm a Cavs fan. It's been very disheartening. The Bulls, Hornets, Wizards, Detroit. The bottom 4 teams on the screen, in a way, I'm happy for all 4 of them, because I want all 4 of them to kind of make a move or just wait and develop their talent, right? But most notably for the Bulls, I think, they had a players-only meeting after 1 loss this season. There's just no confidence in this team. Nobody believes they can actually be relevant. And even though they have relevant pieces like Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, of course, Patrick Williams, this team there's no confidence in this team. And I think it will be a busy offseason. I think early prediction could be a guy like Alex Caruso is on the move, maybe back to the Los Angeles Lakers. But I want to talk about the Cavs. Here's, of course, the Nets, the Raptors. They've won a game. Of course, the Nets, I will say this. Shout out to Cam Thomas, as he's been playing at an all-NBA level off the bench this season. So shout out to Cam Thomas, as he's been, of course, a scoring machine. And then the Toronto Raptors, they got a crazy win just last night. Shout out to Pascal Siakam. But of course, they might also have a busy trade deadline. But the Cavaliers, I've been dancing around it. Let me talk about the Cavaliers. They have looked terrible to start the year. There's just so many moments where our star players, disappear. We're having the same issues that we had in the playoffs of last season, where it's Donovan Mitchell or it's nothing. And it just seems like this team can't get on the same page. Again, I think a big reason is JB Bickerstaff. I'm just not the biggest fan of him. I haven't been since we hired him, and I think that's really what's going to hold us back. Unfortunately for us, Donovan Mitchell might be on the way out if this season doesn't turn into some real playoff production. So unfortunately for us, we might have to, start a new chapter next season. But we're still 4-6. We still have the defensive potential and offensive potential to turn this thing around and rather quickly, and to be a relevant top 4, top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. So to me, I think the Cavs, out of all of these teams, have the most potential, no doubt about it. But that is going to do it for today's video. Again, we're not going to hold you guys up. I think, this episode's going to be a lot quicker than expected. But again, we ran through all the teams that are currently in the playoff picture. We gave you guys 4 title contenders, as well as we ran through the remaining 12 playoff teams and said, do I think they can maintain this production? That is a good way to put it. But, let me know down in the comments. I always love interacting with you guys, answering any questions or comments of course, down below. We're on the road to 4,000 subscribers. That is absolutely insane to say, as just about a year ago, we only had about 50, right? So, incredible support from you guys, and I can't thank you guys enough. But without further ado, I'm going to stop yapping. I'll see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football. Until then, get out of here.